This is TWiT.
The decision in 1961, leading to the May 25th, 61 speech by Kennedy to the joint session of Congress, the urgent national needs speech in which he says, I choose to go to the moon. Well, actually, he said that in 62. I believe this nation should commit itself before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the earth. By the way, Buzz Aldrin told me one time, he says, his favorite part of that speech was returning him safely to the earth.
Right. Yeah.
Buzz, being a wit, went right there. But within about 10 days of him giving that speech, the budget director, David Bell, went into the Oval Office and told the president, NASA is going to break the bank doing this. What can we do about this? And Kennedy was a little flabbergasted at that, because he said twice during that speech, once was written into the speech and another time he ad-libbed. He says, I believe we should do this, but it's going to cost a lot of money. And if you don't agree, tell me now, and let's not even start.
Right.
And those were wise words. And as I said, he said it twice, once in the text of the speech and once in an ad-lib, that he just said at the speech. And he was right about that. But when the budget director says, wow, this is going to be incredible in terms of the costs involved, Kennedy then went to his one and only summit with Khrushchev in early June of 1961 and suggests to him that they turn this moon landing program into a joint effort.
Right.
And that was in response to this concern about the budget. And the initial Khrushchev response was, well, something to think about. Let's talk about it some more. Then they go back to their quarters after that first meeting, and the hardliners get to Kennedy on the American side, and the hardliners on the Soviet side get to Khrushchev, and they come back the next day, and Khrushchev says, it's an interesting idea, but it really needs to wait until we get some arms control limitation underway and a nuclear test ban treaty and some other stuff that needs to come first. And so they dropped it. But Kennedy came back to this over and over and over again throughout his administration with the intention of trying to turn Apollo into a joint program. And it was fundamentally a way to save money. In 1963, then, this is before his assassination, Kennedy calls the NASA administrator, Jim Webb, into the Oval Office and says, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go give a speech at the UN in which I'm going to propose that we turn Apollo into a joint program. And he basically said, and I don't want your advice on this. I've already made my decision. I want you to keep your guys in line. Oh. I don't want Von Braun, and I don't want any of these other guys who are out there, any of the astronauts saying this is a dumb idea. Keep them under control. And he does indeed then in September go to the UN, give this speech about doing the big things together, talking about Apollo. Sergei Khrushchev, the son of the Soviet premier, who was working in the Russian design bureau, Korolev's design bureau in Russia at the time, said he got a call and to come to the Kremlin. And his dad wanted to talk to him about this proposal.
Wow.
And ask him what he thought. And he said, well, there's a couple of things that are good about it. One is we can save some money because they were spending themselves into bankruptcy as well. And oh, by the way, there's at least a tip of the hat to the capabilities that we have demonstrated in space, that we're on a par with the Americans. And, we'll be better with them by our side than working against them. And that seemed to have persuaded Khrushchev to kind of pursue this, but then Kennedy's assassinated in November. Khrushchev is deposed the next year, and nothing happens. But I would contend that had Kennedy remained in office, there probably would have been a way to sort of reduce the costs involved. Not that they would ever not do the program, but it would have been so easy in 1965, 66, as the Gemini program is showing astounding success.
Yeah.
For the president to say, we don't need to do this on the clock by the end of the decade. Let us take a more leisurely approach to this and spend money. And if we don't arrive at the moon until 1975, so what? Why is that a problem? And that might have been what happened, or they might have turned it into a joint program, which would be fascinating. Now, the military and the technical people associated with national security would not like that one little bit, because that would be giving the Russians some knowledge of our technical capabilities.
Right.
And oh, by the way, the Russians would feel the same way about them giving the Americans that knowledge of their technical capabilities as well. So none of that happened. But I think that Kennedy's death, you can't say with a certainty, Kennedy's death was a boon for the program. And literally, Jim Webb, the NASA administrator, pulled it like a gun whenever somebody tried to cut the NASA budget on this. He said, do you mean to tell me that you do not want to complete the dying wish of our slain president?
Wow.
It wasn't his dying wish, but that doesn't matter. Politically, it was a good argument, and he used it all the time.
Well, and that's particularly interesting because, as I recall, Kennedy was behind this for geopolitical reasons, but certainly not for reasons of exploration and science. Now, if I do remember correctly, though, even though the cooperation on the human spaceflight side died rather quickly, on the robotic spaceflight side, there actually was some progress towards the mid to late 1960s of at least sharing information and some technical data. Is that right?
Yeah. No, I mean, very early on, they made deals to share data sets of what they found there. There was also a joint effort to do some satellite capabilities together, mostly just talking to the satellites without any difficulty. There were other joint efforts tried. There was a lot of support for those at the working level. And if they could do it sort of under the radar, they always did it. But if it rose to the level where national leaders were involved, then usually it didn't happen.
Hey, if you enjoyed this clip, be sure to check out This Week in Space. You can find us on your favorite podcast app or see the link in the description below. See you there.